Hello, good afternoon. Thank you for joining me on today's Creative Network. Our special guest in conversation is the wonderful puppeteer and filmmaker Barnaby Dixon. It's actually a conversation that we recorded yesterday, and I'll be playing that to you in just a minute. But before we get into that conversation, there's just a few things that I wanted to share with you. First of all, a little bit of news from Somerset Film and our Ignite Somerset Arts Council supported programme. So the first thing is that we are recruiting. So we are currently advertising a vacancy for a creative technologist. You'll see the advert on Guardian or on the Arts Council's Arts Jobs, in Artist Newsletter and various other places. But if you go on our website, somersetfilm.com/vacancies, you can see more about the post there. If you are interested in supporting our work, then we're about to put together a new advisory panel. It's a disability advisory panel. So if you would like to volunteer a couple of hours twice a year to come and meet with us and talk about ways that we can make both our activities and the work that we do, the venue itself, more accessible to people with disabilities, and you've got some thoughts, comments, insights into that, then we would love to hear from them. If you'd like to get in touch with me, my email is Deborah, that's DEBORAH @somersetfilm.com, and then I'd love to hear from you, and we'll arrange a time to get everyone together. Next up is to just mention that whilst we are recruiting for a new creative technologist, Richard Tomlinson, who is our former creative technologist, he is still available and working with us to provide artist surgery sessions. So if you need any help, exploring aspects of digital technology in your practice, or you've got a piece of work that you're looking to create, then do get in touch in the usual way. There's more details again on our website. And what else is on my list? Yes. So the next exciting thing, you may well have heard about investment that the government have been making in various town centres, notably in Bridgwater and Glastonbury. And in Bridgwater, the town investment deal, we have been able to put forward a proposal, and I wanted to share with you now a little bit of that to give you an insight into that. It's a capital investment programme. So we are looking to, of course, fulfil our vision for the engine room. You'll be aware that over the last year we've been doing building work, and we've actually now we're almost ready to open another floor of space at the engine room, another small studio space which will be ideal for kind of training, meetings and that sort of thing. And we are about in a couple of weeks to have the lift installed. But this investment proposal is actually about that kind of next phase of development. So I wanted to share some images with you that have been put together by our trustee, Nathaniel Williams, who is absolutely brilliant at doing 3D modelling. So these are just some kind of images from the actual 3D model that he's putting together, which is based on obviously plans which have been drawn up by architect Duncan Parr from O2I, which is an architect practice based in Langport. So here you can see that the first thing that we want to do is obviously prioritise completing the new space. So once the lift and now that the stairs are in, it'll be accessible. So we're envisaging another studio space, not unlike Studio One, which some of you will be familiar with, and which you can see an image of there on the right-hand side. So we're looking at another studio space on the very top floor. So expanded facilities, and let me just take that, and there we go. And then probably more majorly, our long-term vision for for the ground floor is to open up the space between the cafe and Studio One. For a number of reasons, really, not least that if you've attended an event at the engine room, and the image that's at the top of the screen on the right, you can see is a Bridgewater Together event, that it can get really packed in the cafe in particular. So we're looking to as I say, take down the wall between the cafe and Studio One to create a much bigger space and kind of put the activities right in the heart. So so there's no separation between cafe and activities. There will be bifold doors, which will mean that the cafe can kind of open out and have more of a continental vibe. But we're really keen to create a kind of circulatory space on the ground floor, so that much more of a visitor experience with exhibitions. And I'll just show you an image of that. Hang on, sorry, there we go. So you can see here kind of, so exhibitions kind of integrated into the space. So rather than kind of a separate space and separate exhibition, kind of bringing those two together. But as you might also have spotted, what we are looking to hopefully create is a kind of is a mobile facility, because of course our activity, it takes place right across the county. It's not just about the four walls of the engine room. It's about servicing all of our community and reaching all of our community. So we've long dreamt of a little mobile pod that we can attach to a car and take out and about and support our activities when we're at festivals and village fetes and things like that. But also so that the idea is that we'll be able to take it back inside the building. So we could create a separate space inside. And also when it's not in use, that it would be parked in kind of our backyard, which we fondly call Central Park. So there's just a little bit of insight into what's going on in terms of the building. These plans are going to be on display in the cafe area at the engine room, and we would love to hear your comments and thoughts on it and to feed into that. Now, just in terms of capital investment, just to let you know, we are about to invest in an 8K 360 camera. So if as an artist you're interested in 360 work, in VR work, then we hope this is a piece of equipment that will help facilitate you to do that. We've also just invested in some projection mapping software. It's called Heavy M, and that will be available to use through our technical support sessions. So again, if you're interested in projection mapping, then we'd love to hear from you. Do get in touch with us. Just finally, before I begin the interview with Barnaby, just to flag up that our special guests at the February edition of Creative Network, which takes place on Wednesday the 23rd of February, and we've got 3 amazing artists for you to meet and discover their work. And we've got Caroline Wilkins, Melanie Thompson and Leona Jones, and they're working together on a brand new piece of work that involves sound, moving image, yeah, but I don't want to tell you any more about it, because I want you to watch the next edition and to find out more about their work and hear it from them. Okay, so without further ado, as I mentioned, here is the interview, the conversation that I had with the amazing Barnaby Dixon just yesterday. How do you describe yourself when somebody asks you what you do for a living?
I don't know. It depends on the context, I suppose. I think I say filmmaker quite a lot because that I think that's easier to explain than puppeteer. Puppeteer is a bit more niche, and usually there's more follow-up questions, which is okay. But for simplicity's sake, sometimes I just say filmmaker.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay, so
Yeah.
tell me about your practice as a filmmaker. or a puppeteer now? What are you working on at this moment in time?
At the moment, I'm working on just personal projects, really. And I say personal projects because what I do is somewhat of a hobby. So there's a fair bit of kind of R&D that just feels like a little bit kind of like play. But a fair amount of it becomes something that I might put in a video, whether it's a new puppet that I'm building or a new kind of musical device that I want the puppets to be able to use. So that's how things are looking currently. Yeah.
So we of course we knew you at the engine room when you were younger, and
Yeah.
your practice then was I guess as an animator, and that must seem like an eon ago to you. But when did you make that shift inside your own head to that sort of more expansive, so puppeteer and filmmaker? Was it with the creation of Dabchick?
Kind of, although I'd been playing around a little bit beforehand, before I messed around with Dabchick so much, with kind of mixing time lapse and kind of real time stuff, and finding and kind of blurring the line between stop motion and live action, mainly for the purposes of trying to figure out a way to speed up stop motion, because animation in general is a very long process.
Yeah.
And I was looking at the viability of creating things online, which is, I mean, it's a tough thing to do because it's few people end up doing it. It did seem like something that I wanted to try and figure out how to do. But the barrier was the kind of the time consumingness of animation. So if I could find a technique that drew on things that I knew about movement principles, building puppets, stop motion or live action puppets, because there's similar techniques involved, I could kind of sort of play to what I knew, but at the same time not have to worry about the time issue in terms of just time consumption. So that was the aim, to find a way of animating but faster.
Thanks.
Yeah.
So, most recently, you've created the characters or the puppets, if you like, for the stage production of the Book of Dust. So, how
Yeah.
did that collaboration come about, and how did you approach it?
Yeah. Well, it came about actually because there's so Nick Heitner is the director, and he was keen to find kind of an approach to puppetry that worked for the for what he was trying to do. Now, the story is dark materials, and each character in that has something called a demon, which is like a representation of their soul. Um, but I think in the past he hadn't been, because I think he'd done previous books within this series, or at least done adaptations of them, and he felt that they were lacking somehow in terms of dynamism. I've seen them since, and I think they're pretty good, but I think he wanted something that could maybe try a slightly different approach. And then I think, I'm not sure if it was the director of music. I'm not sure what his title is exactly. But he had come across my videos online when I had Dabchick review a musical instrument, and just by chance he had been approached to do this show before, just before me rather, and sent this video to Nick and said this seems like quite a fresh way, or at least a way to consider. So Nick then called me. This was back in I think September of 2019.
Yeah.
Because of COVID, things have taken a lot longer than they would have done otherwise. But yeah, the process started from there really. So it's a result of YouTube that I was found to do this.
I find that amazing about YouTube, and it's happened a number of times. And I'm going to ask you a question about it later. But
Oh,
if we can just come back to the puppets that you've created, the demons. So, how did you approach that? Where did you start? Because you worked with a team on it, didn't you?
I did, yes, yes. We were a very small team to start off with. First, it was just me and a producer, and then we had a guy that understood a little bit more about 3D modeling. I thought that would be essential because there was so many puppets to make. There was, I think, around 30 plus. At the beginning, we weren't sure there was going to be that many, but it became apparent that yeah, we need a lot. Um, so the for me, it was about kind of leaning into what I already knew in terms of technique a little bit. So people say that my style of animate, or rather puppetry, is quite specific, and it's kind of centered around the fingers in a way that other puppetry techniques aren't centered in that sort of way. So I was keen to see if there was a way to build these things larger, still using the fingers as the primary mode of operation, but kind of, in a sense, amplifying the movement so you could make long legs or long necks or long tails, kind of drawing from, well, based upon the anatomy of an animal. All these demons are based on animals, so you get a lot of cats and dogs and things like this. But because of that, because there was, cats and dogs, for example, are both quadrupeds, so it made sense that whatever R&D we did in terms of discovering how to make a dog, a lot of it is going to carry over in terms of how to make a cat too. So finding some sort of universal way to approach each animal group, let's say mammals or birds, made a lot of sense. So that was the priority from the beginning. So then it was a case of discovering what mechanisms could be used to kind of accurately mimic the motion of a quadruped's leg or a bird's leg, this kind of thing, and just doing it bit by bit, really, just with that kind of process in mind.
Yeah. And what new materials did you? Because I know you're often, you find your materials from all kinds of different places. But
Yeah.
were there new materials involved in this?
Yes. I mean, some of them came from a new process, well, new for me at least, being 3D printing. And there are a few plastics you can choose from when you start 3D printing. One of the most common ones is PLA, and it's the most common, and a lot of kind of 3D printing snobs will sneer at it, but it's pretty good. It's kind of the hobbyist material of choice. And as a result of that, I feel there's been a lot of refining of it chemically, and it's pretty reliable. So we just ended up using that one, really. And in terms of it might not be the strongest one or the stiffest one, but in a sense, when you start making the puppets larger, you kind of want a degree of flexibility anyway.
Yeah.
It's almost like trees in the wind. You want, when you push down on a leg, if you push down in the wrong way, you'd want it to kind of bow out a little bit as opposed to just shattering. So PLA, that was one of the materials. Another big one was something called Tyvek. This is used in building quite a lot. And it looks like paper. It has a lot of kind of the optical properties which become relevant because we were thinking of lighting these things from the inside, which we, to an extent, ended up doing. But Tyvek, as I say, looks like paper, but it's actually a type of plastic. And for that reason, it's a lot more durable, but it's still very lightweight. And as I say, it looks like paper, so it's pretty aesthetically pleasing too. Think of other materials. We did end up 3D printing with another material called TPU, which is a flexible type of kind of like when we wanted something a bit more rubbery, or that would, as I say, flex in a bit more extreme manner than PLA. We ended up using that one. I guess in terms of processes, the biggest new thing was learning how to 3D model, which I had to do a little bit, but mostly we were able to collaborate for this. So as I mentioned, there was a guy that came on quite early. He then went off to do another job because of COVID, and we didn't have the budget. But then eventually we had a team of recent graduates from AUB in Bournemouth. And these guys are wizards when it comes to 3D modeling. So for me, this was a completely new and fascinating realm to explore, but very crucial because we had so many to make.
Yeah, yeah. So,
Yeah.
so the scale, were they in terms of, because obviously this is a stage production. So were you thinking of the scale in terms of kind of life size, or did you actually have to kind of scale them a little bit larger just because of the purposes of the stage?
It varied, actually. I mean, there can be benefits to making things smaller, and there can be benefits to making things bigger. So we would draw upon nature or the way things are to get kind of like a ballpark estimate of how big to make these things. But there were some animals where making them smaller was problematic. We had to make a snow leopard, and were surprised actually how small snow leopards actually are in real life. They barely get to someone's knees, just maybe a little bit higher than that. Whereas we wanted this to be, because of the comparative size of most quadrupeds, we would be tackling with we'd be dealing with a weight issue if we made it too big for the fingers to operate. So these ones became full body operations. So in that case, we scaled it up. In some cases, we scaled it down. I think I mean, some of the younger, or rather, the two main characters were meant to be sort of adolescent sort of age. So we were able to kind of get away with sort of scaling the cat more towards the kitten side of things, and the dog more towards the puppy side of things, which did us some favors when it comes to the weight issues pertaining to the finger style operation. So yeah, we would estimate, we'd kind of we'd use nature as a rough guide, but the guide was kept rough.
Right,
Yeah.
right, got you. And were there any other kind of considerations just in terms of the fact that it was on a stage as opposed
Mm.
to, you know, where you take Dabchick out or other things? Were there any other adaptations that you kind of made in response to the setting?
Yeah, I mean, with Dabchick, I have the benefit of being able, to shoot with the other hand and get as close and as far away as I want. On
Yeah,
stage, of course, you can't really direct the audience's attention in quite the same way. So scale was a concern with regard to that too, actually, because we wouldn't want to make things overly small. I remember at some point we were considering making little bugs to sit on people's shoulders, and it wasn't necessarily so knowing that people would be able to observe it, just to kind of we were kind of trying to make the work a little bit easier for ourselves as well, making some of the puppets very, very small scale.
yeah,
But I think a big thing actually, and this isn't related to scale, but it's almost like I guess it would be choreography, because with Dabchick I can be filming and have him jump from the left to the right, and then in the next shot make him come in from the left to the right as well, so it looks like he's jumping into frame, and just edit it so it looks like those two spaces are together. A big issue, and this was not so much my issue, but the movement director had to really consider how to get the puppets across the stage in a kind of graceful and believable way. I mean, they can walk, but at the same time, the puppeteers are kind of scurrying behind to a degree, and you wouldn't want the movement to be so unnatural that the audience is looking at the puppeteers. You see what I mean?
yeah,
So, um, so yeah, with Dabchick, I can frame it so that just my hand is in shot and the rest of my body is, but there's no way to do that on stage,
yeah,
obviously.
yeah,
The actors are always in the frame, so that was a consideration, how best to kind of choreograph things in order to make that less noticeable. It's always going to be noticeable, but you have to find a way to kind of measure it.
yeah. And was that collaboration with the movement director? Was that did that start kind of quite early on in your process of developing the puppets, or did it just purely come at rehearsal stage?
It's funny that there's a few things that we kind of kicked down the road, knowing that it is going to be simpler when we have the stage available, for example, or the actors available. Um, that was one thing. We had started kicking the can down the road with regard to that when it comes to the fitting of the puppets too, because we weren't sure what actors were going to get what parts. I don't think that was
Right.
set in stone
Yeah.
early on. So we were thinking, okay, well, when we understand who the actors are, we'll make the fixings to the fingers, for example, the right size for them, sort of tailor make them. But then we realized, oh, dang, there's going to have to be understudies, and the
Oh,
chances
yeah.
that the understudies have the exact same hand size as the actors is impossible. So I had to figure out a system that these things are kind of universally sized, so it can be operated by someone with, or rather a character who has various people playing them at different times. Um, but with regard to the collaboration with the movement director, he's been there since the beginning, actually. He's also the co-director.
Right.
Um, so yeah, he's a very easygoing guy, and it was just finding the balance between kind of what looks right. He had a good sense of it, really. I didn't need to sort of say, oh, it would look better like this, because he had a good sense of it.
That's
Yeah,
nice. That's really nice.
yeah, yeah.
And in terms of the number, I mean, you said how many kind of puppets you were making, but did you have to make like more than one? How long was the run, and how kind of durable were they through the kind of? Because I've worked as an actor before, and we're not always the greatest when it comes to looking after our props. So
Mm.
so how durable were they for the run of the actual production?
I'll say that, people were telling me, oh, the actors are just going to throw these things around. And to an extent they did, but I think it's also important for an actor to realize where the limits are, in terms of, you kind of want them, at least in the rehearsal process, or I did at least, to break them and to
Yeah, to be
understand
pushing them. Yeah,
yeah, yeah, because
yeah,
you don't want that to happen on stage. It has, and it will continue to throughout the run happen on stage too. We have a member of my team currently backstage, I think, for each of the runs, who will kind of take a puppet away when it gets broken, and put a substitute in. We don't have substitutes for every puppet, but for the main ones that drive the narrative, it's necessary to. So that's kind of how it works a little bit backstage. Um, it's a difficult balance in terms of puppet design, because I know some puppetry companies that are really keen to over-engineer the puppets because it's on the makers, I suppose, or it's seen that way. If the puppet breaks, then I think some people would consider, oh well, they've done their job wrong. So quite often they'll reinforce and they'll add a load of weight, but so the puppets doesn't break, or rather the puppets don't break. But my concern was whether the actors might break, because the movements that they have to do are quite demanding, and the more weight that we add on the puppets, the harder time they're going to have. And it's not just them that will suffer; the movement will suffer too.
Yeah.
It's very easy, well, with the right technique, it's possible, rather, let's say, to make a light puppet seem heavy by the way you move it. But the other way around is actually not possible, because if an object is a certain weight, there's only a certain amount of speed you can achieve with it. You
Yeah.
can't kind of mime it to be heavier than it actually is. So that's a consideration too. Yeah.
It's interesting what you were saying about kind of over engineering puppets. There's a lovely comment on one of your films on Instagram, and I think it's I've got the name here. It's Lon Makes, and his comment was what, a single rod, burn the witch, which which I kind of took to be a kind of a comment about how you'd actually made. I think that was is it the hare? Or a rabbit. Forgive me, I didn't quite notice the ears. I think it might have been a hare. And I took that as being kind of a comment from one puppet maker to another. That sort of thing of that's almost the simplicity is sort of the beauty of it in one respect.
Yeah. I mean, it was an idea we had early on because, of course, there were going to be bespoke actors for certain parts, like main parts, where the demon character would be so dynamic that it just couldn't be done where that actor could operate their own demon. This was the plan early on, I think. I think they were keen to figure out a way so that the person could operate their own demon, but
right.
When they had a sense of how dynamic we were keen to make these things, it just didn't make sense. However, with the rod puppets, it did kind of make sense. You can have a rod coming down from the puppet's head, and if you spring the rest of the puppet in a kind of neutral way, when you pull the head down, the whole body follows in a kind of realistic fashion. So yeah, rod puppets have been around for a while, and I'm sure it's such a simple concept that this must have been done before. It made a lot of sense for us, especially if the actors are trying to focus on acting simultaneously as operating the puppet, to have a single rod, get the most amount of dynamism out as possible out of a single rod. Made a lot of sense.
So how much, in terms of the original kind of brief that you were given, how much of a free rein did you have? Because you mentioned about the lighting the puppets from the inside, which when I saw that, when you put that out on social media, I thought, that's genius. That because we've all watched the TV version where where they're kind of made to look as realistic as possible, and I guess this is something of the beauty of theatre as well. You bring your imagination to it, but So how much was kind of set in stone, and how much was really kind of open for you to interpret?
Well, I think because we started, or at least I started, so early on into the process, it was a bit more of kind of like a brainstorming session from the beginning, So I think I was aware of the material Tyvek that I mentioned before that made sense for the outside of the puppet, just in terms of keeping it light. But I think it was the movement director who suggested, oh, we could light them from the insides, and then as soon as he said that, I was like, oh yes, most likely we could if we do it the right way. So yeah, it was collaborative in a lot of senses. I think I took charge of the mechanisms mostly. It made sense for me too. But I was certainly open to kind of like aesthetic contributions and ideas that other people have from different fields that could inform or improve the way that we're approaching this. Quite often the knee-jerk reaction is to say kind of like, oh no, I don't think so. But so I kind of trained my reaction to be, let me think about this. You know what I mean? That way, there were certainly times where the director asked for something and my knee-jerk reaction is like, I've never done that before. I'm scared to say yes. But you don't, I mean, very few directors, or at least Nick never was, he's not going to push you to answer in the moment because he wants what is possible.
Yeah.
So if you
Yeah.
don't know in the time, you just have to say, I don't know quite, let me think about that. I think
Yeah.
that has become, in terms of working with a group of people, that's become kind of like the golden phrase for me. Let me think about that. And sometimes before too long, you can realize, yeah, this wouldn't be possible, but maybe this other thing is, or actually that idea is possible. Um, let's try it,
Yeah.
and we can discover.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when you're producing for something like Book of Dust, part of the whole
Mm.
process is that you're building in time to develop the characters or the puppets. But much of your own and the work you're making now is your personal work. And from my perspective, that has always seemed to me that those characters have come about because you're constantly playing or constantly,
Yeah.
well, I use the word play, but other people might use the word experimenting or researching new materials. Do you set time aside to do that, or is that just a constant for you in terms of the way you kind of are as a creative?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, you can experiment with something and put a lot of time into it and realize there's no way this is going to work, But by putting the time in to discover that, you might realize you might come across another idea in the future that you think, oh, well, actually that technique that didn't work, I can draw upon an aspect of it, or you can realize, oh, yes, I've tried this before and it won't work. You have to be forgiving with yourself when it comes to R&D. Obviously, if you're investing time into an idea, it's because you have a sense of it, or that it might be viable. So if it doesn't work, or it doesn't work in the way that you wanted it to, you just have to take that not necessarily as a loss, but as a learning opportunity.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah,
and the more you do, and the more failures you make, the less failures you make, if you see what I mean. And
yeah,
you don't even have to view it as a failure. It's all growth. So I allow myself time to do this. It's the balance is tricky. You have to, especially as an individual content creator, when no one else is telling you what to do, you have to kind of forge your own path.
yeah,
So that essentially, I mean, I say you have no boss, but your boss is your audience in a sense. You kind of have to get a sense of what they want, but they're not the only boss. You also have to give us or get a sense of what you want to do, and what you would feel passionate doing. Because there's no use stumbling upon some sort of idea that the audience love, but you hate doing. That's gonna be super demoralizing, and vice versa. You don't want to invest some loads of time in an idea that you think is brilliant that no one likes. So as you create and as you mess up, or as your audiences change and grow, and as you change and grow, you have to kind of find a line between um, using kind of old tried and tested things that people like, and discovering and producing new things that people will also like. It's a discovery. So you want to I think you get what I'm saying. You want to kind of you want to give people what they like and what you like to produce. Some of those things are going to be old, and some of them are going to require innovation. So you got to keep the plate spinning of the old tried and tested stuff. You don't want
yeah.
that plate to fall off, but at the same time you want to see what other plates you can get spinning, so that if this one does fall off, or you get tired of it, or the audience gets tired of it, you have a few more kind of eggs in various baskets. I could this is getting too rich in analogies, but I think you get the idea.
No, it's funny. Well, I always use it. I think I've told you this before because I always use you as an example when I'm talking to BFI
Mm,
filmmaking students. That idea of playing, of experimenting,
yeah,
of continually making content. But of course, you've got that other thing in terms of an audience,
yeah,
in that that is paying your wages too. So
yes,
whether that's your YouTube audience and kind of what you get through that, but also because you have a Patreon account, don't you? So
that's right.
yeah, so you're creating content in order to keep those supporters kind of
Yeah, yeah,
engaged too, really. Uh,
yeah. So that's something else to weigh up, of course.
yeah,
Yeah.
and how do you manage your social media? Because that could be like a complete distraction. Do you give yourself certain hours to do it, or how do you manage it, or do you just ignore it?
I ignore a lot of it, actually. I think more than most people.
Right.
And I see a lot of content creators getting quite demoralized by the comment section. And I don't seem to as much as many. I mean, I'm sure it could weigh on me if I dwelled on it too much, so I don't dwell on it too much. I do get the sense that if a comment is particularly valid, it will somehow float up to the top to my attention. You know, I mean,
Yeah,
they have the
yeah,
upvote and the downvote function on YouTube comments, so that if a lot of people are in agreement about a certain thing, I'm sure I'll be made aware of it. But also, you know, the audience are not the only boss, and if a lot of people thought the same thing, but I didn't think it, I'm not going to pretend to either. You know, you have to have a sense of your own values in terms of what you want to produce, and if the audience or a big part of the audience aren't behind it, you know, you have to have the conviction to go along with it. It may be, and this happens often, that you see the potential in an idea that people don't. I
yeah,
think I'm quite good at that in seeing potential in things that aren't quite there yet.
yeah,
So I might stick at an idea even if the audience says, "What are you doing?" You know, and it takes some self-belief to do that, but it's paid off enough in the past that I kind of test my internal barometer when it comes to that. It's not with everything, but occasionally, you know, I will think, I think I know better here, you know.
yeah, yeah. I really liked recently. So there was some negative, and I'm not going to dwell on this, but there was some negative comments
Sure.
about something that you put out, and I really liked the fact that you addressed all of the comments through your creativity. You made
Yeah.
another piece and got the characters to discuss it. You know, it's Dad Chick and Philosophish, and they were discussing it, and I thought that was really kind of the right response, really. But my other favourite comment that comes up time and time again on your social media is, when are these puppets going to be available in Walmart?
Yeah, I would love that to be the case. I mean, I think I would. I mean, I get somewhat torn because I think, oh, well, if everyone had these puppets, maybe they'd make the things that I would make, and then maybe I've kind of boxed myself out of the market somehow. But I also think people could make these things if they wanted to also. I mean, I do often get the comments of like, how do you make this? And it's like, well, where could I even start saying? I mean, so many of these things rely on so many specific processes, many of which I've discovered.
Yeah,
Invariably, when you start answering the question, telling people, they want more and more specifics, and you
yeah,
realize, oh, this is someone that's not actually going to do it themselves. And I would encourage people, I suppose, at least when it comes to, you know, their own education or their own process or journey creatively. It's like there's enough information that you could have a pop at making these puppets if you wanted to, but why would you want to? I mean, I think a lot of the charm of what I have, or a lot of the charm that people get from my videos, is knowing that these things are came from me, and that are
yes,
some
yes,
you know, the degree to which they are unique is, you know, people recognize that. So I wouldn't, in some sense, you don't want to give people the blueprints for their own personal development too. It's like, what can you do with puppetry? Puppetry can do so much, you know.
yeah,
If it's been around for as long as it has been, which is probably perhaps longer than many storytelling devices, it's like, and it's still it's still having innovation, you know,
yeah.
take place within it. It's like, then there's so many kind of passages to explore. It's like people uh, people should get on that. It could be fascinating to see what this medium can do, and by giving people the roadmap, you know, it's there's no one roadmap. I guess that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point about your characters. I mean, sat over my shoulder is Kermit, but you know, and there's something about that this character is so kind of solid.
Mm,
We it's so fixed that we almost, even when we play with it, we kind of stay true to the character. And I
mm,
guess so. There's that aspect about a particular character that you would stay true to Dabchick.
yes.
I think the other bit of joy, particularly when watching Dabchick, is that you're right. I know that it's a product of your imagination, and
Mm,
and I've had the pleasure and the benefit of kind of knowing you only a little bit, but you know, and so there's always that moment of surprise when Dabchick surprises me, and then I get that kind of double whammy because it's also it's Barnaby that's surprising me as well. Because because it's kind of like, where did that come from? You know,
Yeah.
it's really lovely. Yeah.
It's
So,
well, I mean, I kind of feel it to a degree too, because in to the extent that you allow the audience to kind of weigh in on what you're doing, and this is why I remember actually, I'm jumping all over the place a little bit, but I remember chatting with someone who I like the chap, and I think it came from a good place. He was utterly confused as to why I would do a series, because he'd calculated that if I had spent the same amount of time working on a feature film in terms of the duration of each Dabchick episode, that I could have made a feature film by now. He was like, "Oh, you've missed a trick here," and I was thinking maybe, but I also wouldn't have had the constant feedback from the audience and getting a sense of what this segment of the world thinks, or what my audience thinks.
yeah.
And in that regard, Dabchick is an ever evolving, ever changing, kind of adaptable character to an extent. I mean, he's recognizable, but I make choices on what he will say based on what people kind of what either people will expect or what people won't expect too. So he's not me. Obviously, I have to think of what he might say in order to write the thing, but I also get surprised by him in that regard too. So I think that makes it very fun for me.
Yeah, I've always got this slight impression that kind of Dabchick has been a companion. So
Mm,
you might be going off and doing some other things, and Dabchick kind of comes with you, and so therefore the circumstances that you're in, because this is Barnaby's world, suddenly
yeah,
becomes food for Dabchick, and a kind of scenario for
yeah,
Dabchick too, in that sense. I mean, I
yes.
wonder whether I get it's difficult to know, isn't it? But I mean, just thinking about the Muppets. I mean, they start as a TV program. They didn't start as it wasn't a feature film to begin with, was it? So
No, in fact, you can see some of the early evolution of like Kermit. I think that Jim Henson did some early like commercials, like with a character that was somewhat similar to
yeah,
Kermit,
yeah,
and you can see the evolution of it happening. And I recently, and I can't believe really that I hadn't looked into these sort of things. I'm somewhat, as strange as this sounds, somewhat kind of a newcomer to puppetry.
yeah,
So
of
I
course,
discovered, because I came from the stop motion background.
yeah,
I know a fair bit about that, but not really about the history of puppetry so much. So I just recently watched some of the early kind of Muppet Show from perhaps, what was it, the 70s,
yeah.
that I believe was shot in the UK. I think I might be wrong about that. There's an English contingent to the
Yeah,
cast.
yeah,
Yeah. So
yeah.
yeah, I guess in a similar way, that gave them the opportunity to episodically test the water and see what the audience responded to. Um, I mean, we have the benefit of a comment section now,
Yeah.
and although people do complain about the comment sections, I don't think I'd ever disable it. I think this is too useful of a tool, just to gauge where people are at.
Uh,
So yeah.
That's interesting, because it brings me on to my next question, which
Mm,
is about the fact that the kind of the initial driver was really YouTube, and kind of creating content for YouTube so that people could see your work, and Manu kind of, and it was just I say just, it was a kind of a behind the scenes look at Manu that really kind of led to this massive explosion and
yeah,
exposure kind of
yeah.
for you. And you said earlier, so you kind of answered my question, which is, are you still conscious of that platform's influence when it comes to um, I mean, and obviously you are, because, like you say, the music director saw your video. But how about the other way? Are you watching that platform and being influenced by how content creators are making work now on YouTube?
No doubt, definitely. I mean, I would say, and this sounds kind of like a funny type of videos for me to watch, but I was when I was first kind of, well, whether I was doing a stop motion project or a puppetry project, each of those things require a kind of building process to start with, whether you're making the sets, the puppets, drawing, designing, this kind of thing. And I would have things on in the background sometimes, and I would see sometimes like let's play channels or podcasts, and I would think these people can create hours of content every day. And I think it was around perhaps It might have been 2013 or 14, perhaps. Animators did quite well on YouTube up until a certain point, and it was, I think, jokingly called the adpocalypse. Do you know this? Where these types of short form, or rather things that took a while to make, became less viable for advertising. So perhaps the algorithms favored long form stuff
Right.
over short form stuff, and since stop motion or animation in general takes so long, it's hard to create long form style animation.
Yeah.
So knowing that just financially and in other ways too, well, in terms of time consumption, as I mentioned before, how some people were getting around the issues like this. I mean, filming yourself playing computer games might seem like a kind of like a hack in some ways, and in some ways it is, because obviously the game developers are in somewhat control of the or have been responsible for the visuals of your episode. Um, it's still viable, I think, and it's in the interest quite often of the game developers to allow let's players to play, because it kind of
Yeah.
advertises the game too.
Yeah.
But it still does feel like a little bit of a hack, and I don't mean that in a negative way, actually, because a lot of these guys, anyone could potentially do it, but a lot of these guys kind of are able to make a living based on their personalities, their comedic, qualities, or even like their aptitude at the game, you know. So I don't know. I think it seems like a funny place to draw inspiration from Let's Play, but I think what it did is it showed me that there are ways to create kind of entertaining long form videos. You know what I mean? And that became, I'm sure I couldn't create hours and hours a day, but there, it did show me that, or it gave me an equation at least to try and figure out how can I make longer form videos without spending as long as I have been making them.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm.
And what about other social media platforms, Barnaby? Have you been tempted by TikTok? I mean, I know you're on Instagram, and I haven't seen that you're on. Well, I'm not on TikTok, so
Yeah.
that might be why I've not seen it. But have you been tempted by any others? And I asked that question partly because of TikTok being, quite sort of the main platform
Yeah.
at the moment, but also I happen to watch a Snapchat kind of series,
Yeah.
and so Snapchat are commissioning content for that platform.
Mm.
So have you been tempted by any others?
Uh, not so much. I use Instagram. I kind of use Instagram a little bit like a sketchbook in some ways, where especially since the content, although I think they've changed it now. They used to used to be able to post videos only like a minute long or something like that. Now you can post Instagram videos. I can't remember what they call it exactly.
Yeah.
So I'll do that. But if I just want to test a quick like comedic or musical idea, it's Instagram's quite useful for that,
Mm.
And I don't make money on Instagram either, so I
Right.
don't feel like an obligation to make sure that it's always kind of top quality. Um, so Instagram's quite good like that. I was on Facebook for a while. I think I have a maybe like a couple of 100,000 followers on Facebook, but I tend not to use it so much. I don't feel Facebook really, at this point at least, is really helping creators grow that much. I see that every time I posted a video, I was losing followers on Facebook, whereas on YouTube I would gain them. So something is wrong
Oh.
with the algorithm there, and it just seems counterproductive to invest in it when it doesn't seem to be investing in the creator at this point.
And is Facebook monetized in the same way? It must. I'm not quite sure what
Right.
the model is behind it.
It's hard. It's hard to get one verified on Facebook and two monetized on Facebook. It does seem that Facebook is making money, but it doesn't seem like there's a simple way for the creators to be making money. At least, I mean, it's a social media platform more so than YouTube is, obviously.
Yeah, yeah,
But perhaps that is the
yeah.
priority. But there are adverts on Facebook, so clearly there is, they are keen to.
Well, and they keep launching different tools. Like the
Yeah,
latest one is like a podcast tool and that sort of thing. So they're
right.
obviously interested in that area, maybe. But who
It could be.
knows?
I've fallen out of touch with it in a sense. I became somewhat disenfranchised with it like about a year ago, perhaps, and I haven't looked into what they've been doing since. So I hope it kind of I hope it can find a way to have, or rather for it to work for creators, because obviously eyeballs on any platform is what any platform would like, and if creators are creating content that directs eyeballs towards the platform, then it would make sense for them to find a way to reward them or incentivize them. I just don't feel incentivized
Yeah,
to do that.
yeah. But also maybe that's not where your audience demographic kind of is anyway, because it's only older people like me that are allegedly on Facebook anyway.
Yeah, I mean it does seem, engagement is down on in terms of my videos on Facebook. I'm not sure why that could be. Perhaps because, as I say, it's by and large a social media platform.
Yeah.
YouTube is like more of an entertainment video posting one, so people come to YouTube for that, and probably for Facebook for something different. So yeah, but no reason why they couldn't be kind of conflated, and they are, but just seems YouTube's a bit more viable to invest my time in at the moment. Yeah.
Well, certainly in our household, every time one of your videos comes out, there's a real flurry, and my husband David's like, there's a new subject now, and we kind of gather around this one little tiny screen to watch it. I don't know why we do
it. Because they're so good as well.
Yeah, that's right. Yes,
it's lovely to hear that. It's hard to comprehend, when you think about how many people there are watching it. Like when I put it up, there will be thousands of people will have watched it in the first 10 minutes. And hearing you say that, it makes me think like, whoa, there are many different households that might be doing that to my videos, and it's almost incomprehensible. But in kind of a magical way. I guess it makes me feel a bit kind of responsible. Well, I was already feeling that way, but for what you put out, especially if it's going into people's homes, it's YouTube is a bit more of the Wild West, isn't it, when it comes to entertainment and
yeah, but I quite like that aspect of it. I mean, that's what we like about Dabchick and about you as a creator, is that there's just something you're like, it comes from over there, and you're like, and but
it's left field, isn't it? I mean,
definitely,
and I like that. It's hard to. Or at least it would be quite a special company that's able to make things so unpredictably, if it was kind of a creation by committee, So I think individuals making creative decisions, have maybe less at stake, or maybe more at stake. It's hard to say.
I do wonder what what the BBC, if they gave you a producer and gave you a series, because if you think about their comedy and the comedy that they have encouraged and supported, everything from kind of Monty Python, it has been left field, really. So maybe I should email someone and go, hey, have you seen this? I don't know anybody important enough at the BBC, I'm afraid, Barnaby. So
I'd be open to it for sure.
Yeah,
for sure.
Good.
If they let me, if they were good about letting me sort of keep whatever I think is important with regard to sort of creative decision making and the characters. I'd be certainly open to it.
Did you see Pete Snelling's series Fuzzbox on BBC Three? And BBC Three is coming back, so who knows?
I need to do that. I should do that. No, I haven't.
Yeah. But just going back to your inspirations, who are the sort of past and kind of current content creators that kind of inspire you? What, or even down to like the things you watched when you were younger? Where's that inspiration come from?
Well, Aardman Animations was like probably the first one in terms of like what I really thought about something that I wanted to do. I remember being so confused by how stop motion was done when people tried to explain it to me. It was like, oh well, they move it and then they take a picture and then they move, and I just couldn't understand why the hand wasn't in shot. I couldn't understand that these were photographs all put together. So I assumed this thing had been filmed, and I think it was my just lack of understanding of it that bred a certain intrigue and just wanting to try it out. So yeah, Aardman was a big one. I then discovered kind of later on sort of Eastern Europe's contribution to animation history. And that was fascinating because it was like nothing else that I'd seen before. It was, that's pretty left field, just in terms of quite often an individual creator, quite often, and for good reasons and bad, or rather, this worked in some cases and was terrible in some cases. When you have kind of like a government that is funding things, in some senses the people had creative freedom, but ultimately if they crossed the line they could have ended up somewhere very bad. So you would see sometimes examples of very creative and unique expressions or decisions, but you realized it had to toe a line. You know, Jiří Trinka is a good example of this. I think this is the guy that made the hand in Czechoslovakia, I think in the late 60s. So he was kind of the Walt Disney of Czechoslovakia, I think. So his stuff was incredibly apolitical, and I think he did a few like westerns and things like that, which, thinking about it now, might have been somewhat contentious to sort of governments of the Eastern Bloc. I don't know, but he got away with that at least. But I think it was probably weighing on him to some degree, because he made the hand as absolutely kind of like a political statement, but it got through the censors. It was about this artist. If you watch it, you'll see. I don't want to give the ending away, but just the pressures and difficulty of being an artist in an ideological country or a place run with a certain ideology. You know, so it got through the censors because they just thought, oh, another film by our Walt Disney, you know, a cute little film. But it doesn't take much to realize what that film's about. Fortunately, I think because things weren't run so well in that country as a result of the regime, the censors probably weren't paid enough to really scrupulously look through this thing and figure out what it was truly about. So as a result, it got out to the public, and it was only banned after his death. But his death only happened a couple of years later. So who the heck knows what happened there?
Yeah.
Fascinating.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
So lately, you've been I say lately because you've been experimenting with kind of slow motion for a while now, haven't you? And definitely kind of UV and was it Season's Taser or something? I love those two little characters.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, someone suggested another title for that, which was Zappy Christmas.
Oh, very good.
Oh, that's better. I should change the title.
Yeah, but maybe that would have given it away too much. I don't know.
Maybe so. That's true. Although Season's Tasings doesn't leave too much of the exaggeration. As soon as the taser comes along, you're like, okay. But
yeah.
The UV lights. I love this as a technique, actually, as a kind of practical effect. A lot of people have said quite early on, use green screen. But the hindrance that can be in terms of getting out, you know, handheld camera stuff, it's like not possible. And even if you could do it well, you could never do it well enough. There would always be kind of like a blurry line around the outside. You'd have to CG in the bits of the puppet that are covered by the hand. It would look like a mess. And it's much funnier, I think, to lean on the fact that there's a grown man scurrying behind these puppets as he films them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I go that route. But
and kind of fits with that sort of YouTube thing. I mean, a lot of the sort of the game players, you know, now they've got really squished setups, and Jack is always saying to me, "Oh, look at his setup! Look at their setup with all the fabulous screens and everything else that they've got, and and all the things in the background, and it's all beautifully staged." But what I really like about yours is that it's almost like there's a black cloth covering it, and it's your living room, and we know that, and it makes it. I don't know. There's just something that we can
accessible, perhaps.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
I like that. I like that. I think it's people must realize that anything that is, sometimes things that are overly slick draw attention to themselves. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So sometimes you want to kind of keep it a little bit grassroots, a little bit homemade, in order, I don't know, maybe the word is modesty, but I don't know. I wouldn't want to lay claim to that in this setting. But I think I like the idea. I like the idea that someone could say, okay, well, I got a living room and I could make a puppet. Maybe I could do this. You know, I don't want people to think that the barrier to them getting creative is money.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Or that you need the latest kit, or you need this, that, and the other. That
can be a hindrance. Actually, that can be a hindrance, because and I've fallen into this trap before, where I think, I've got an idea, it would really look better with this camera, so why don't I save up for this camera? And all the time, you know, you could have been making this thing with the camera that you have, and the best camera for the job is the camera that you have. I don't think I made that up in terms of a phrase. I've heard that before, but it's
I'm
so true.
stealing it wherever you got
Yeah,
it.
I'm sure I've stolen it anyway, so feel free.
But
Yeah.
what's next in terms of experimentation? Because I tell you, the thing I really liked that you did was when you used the kind of mobile phone and you inverted the screen, and you had a kind of a camera on your face
That's
for
so
a
funny that
character.
you brought that up because I'm making another one. I was being,
Ah,
I was up until like a minute before this call. I'm making a new face screen one. I would
oh,
show you, but it's
excellent.
currently in the casting process, so everything's covered up. And I'm so when I make a puppet, quite often I cast it in silicon so that I can make it again. And it happens to be at a point now where I can cast it, so it's all covered with silicon mold making stuff currently. But yeah, I really like that too. And this also, I mean, the reason I'm so keen on this, well, for lots of reasons really, but I have been fascinated by people that are able to create content quickly. In the case of like Let's Play channels, I'm fascinated that they can do this. But I'm also fascinated by those people that are able to kind of improvise a performance quickly or in
Mm.
real time. And I've seen a guy, Mark Rebullet, that does this on or
Mm.
Reb, and he kind of he just improvises these often quite X-rated but pretty hilarious off the cuff improvised tunes. An excellent pianist, excellent singer, and he's able to create just a stream of consciousness stream for his YouTube audience, and as a result gained great success. He's very, very talented. Um, and I kind of try and think, is there a way that this can be done with puppetry? You know, I do a little bit of music stuff, and I have enough equipment so that I could maybe kind of improvise something. And the face screen is great because it simply captures your face in real
Mm.
time. You don't have to worry about puppeteering it because it's your face. Um, and it also adds a kind of human real time element to it too, which can be lacking in puppetry if you're not careful. So yeah, I love the face screen effect too. I think I'll be using a lot more of it in the future.
I
Yeah.
love that idea of that sort of improv with it, and
Mm.
kind of like the characters that you always used to see a character go to a garden centre and there'd be a character, and obviously the operator is kind of sat behind, he's behind a screen and can see how people are kind of interacting then with that character, and you get that, and you sort of get those cheeky comments as you're walking away, and all that sort
Yeah.
of thing. There's something quite nice about that, and quite dangerous in a good way.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, me and Dan went down to Bristol. I say recently, but it wasn't actually. It was like 2019, which feels like a long time ago. I think
Yeah.
around April. We just shot a little bit of the bug puppet dancing around, and the response has been really good. It didn't blow up like other videos did, but looking at the view count now, it's done very well.
Mhm.
And I think there's something about the fact that it's happening in real time that is proved by things happening around it, people reacting to it, animals reacting to the puppets, that puts it in a slightly different realm, but I think a really exciting realm. You're right. It can be dangerous because things can go wrong, but it's kind of not on you at that point. It's what it is on you to do is to react well in the moment and to try and find a way to save it. And I think there's a bit more of an exciting kind of seat of your pants type creativity that I think would be wonderful to try and figure out how to do. I mean, if I'm to consider doing like live shows in the future, things like this would be very useful to kind of lean into and gain kind of an expertise surrounding. Um, yeah,
Oh my
I
God!
like.
Imagine Dab Chick on tour and that kind of. There's that comedian who goes to different places and he does sort of stays there for 3 or 4 days, and then is it Mark somebody it's on Radio 4, and then he'll do an entire stand-up comedy thing about the place that he's in, and of course all of the audience are kind of drawn,
Yeah.
they're local people, so they're in on the joke because
Mhm.
it's like jokes about Highbridge and Bridgewater. I live in Highbridge and I work in Bridgewater, and I can, and it's okay because I'm from the, you can make that joke and I'm letting you make that joke type of thing. So yeah, maybe there's
Yeah.
just imagine Dab Chick on tour.
He could get away with it in a way that a real
He could.
person can't. Maybe a comedian finds ways around it. I think that's
Yeah.
very ballsy of him in the best way possible to try and kind of roast people. I imagine it's a lot of the observations are kind of critical in a humorous way.
Well, but just that slight irony of things, and especially when things aren't you know, politically sensitive,
Yeah, for
sensitive.
sure.
You know, when there's a statue to somebody in particular, you know, or that kind of thing. He kind of comments on that. But what about some of your characters? So, like, Philosophish is really interesting.
Yeah.
Possible kind of series in there for Philosophish to go exploring different subjects?
I hope so. Yeah, I hope so. I mean, I've done around 4 videos with this Philosophish character now, and I hope to do some more. It requires a lot of research, the Philosophish ones.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And it can be a bit of a minefield as well in terms of the subjects. I think it's good to kind of tackle subjects, especially contentious ones, from an angle sometimes that people find contentious as a means of trying to just get people thinking about it in a way, you know, from an angle that they haven't thought of things before, you know, just so that people can feel free to think. I mean, the idea was to create a character that is so kind of sort of lovable and innocent and in the best way possible ignorant to certain subjects, so that you can get the sense that he's free to go to these places. I mean, it doesn't always work, as you can see in terms of the audience response, but I think in a lot of cases most people appreciate it. Actually, you will hear quite a lot of voices from maybe whatever it would be, an activist contingent of my audience, but I'm also aware that they don't speak for everyone.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I wondered if there's a sort of aspect to the fact that, you know, he's a fish. That idea of, especially in philosophy, that he could explore a route and go down a particular route, but then because he's a fish and allegedly they don't have very good memories, that he might forget that and then explore that same subject, but kind of go off down a different route because he doesn't remember going in the other direction, or I don't know.
There's a lot to draw upon. Yeah. There's a lot to draw upon. His forgetfulness can be quite a useful tool, and if he says something wrong, I think it's somewhat forgivable. You know, I think people have got to always be open to being wrong as well. I mean, be wrong isn't it's almost similar to the creative process. You know, there are many times when I am wrong, or you know, when it comes to creation, and you have to be you have to see that you are, you know, you can't be told that you are. You have to understand what is wrong about something to really kind of internalize it and grow from it, you know. And I think it's certain subjects are becoming difficult to talk about, and I think we must kind of encourage kind of like a multitude of, a diversity of ideas or approaches when it comes to kind of thinking about issues and potentially solving them. Otherwise, some people are going to think, these people are missing something, and other people are going to think that, oh, these people are missing something, when voices are heard that come from such a left field that it's like, oh, well, this person must be ignorant. They might be ignorant, or maybe they've looked into it and have come to a different conclusion. You know.
Yeah, absolutely.
Going into these conversations, assuming that someone might know more than you is always a good thing.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. It's really important to have those conversations, and like you say, and it's okay to, if you find you're wrong, to kind of admit that you're wrong and move that conversation forward. Be willing to have the conversation, because right now everyone's a little bit afraid of kind of like, oh, now you're arguing with me, and it kind of develops into that it becomes two really fixed opposite sides, as opposed to a conversation about a subject, and that you can voice a different opinion and kind of say, and this is why. But if it's just shut down because people are frightened that they've offended you or whatever, then we'll never move beyond that, really, will we? So.
It's true, and people will be quiet, perhaps out of fear, maybe. But you can't control what they think. So it's better to hear what people think, you know, and then debunk it in the spirit of debate,
Yeah.
or just simply conversation. It doesn't have to be debate. It doesn't have to be that, I mean, argumentative. It can just be, you know, I think a lot of people are coming from a lot more of a honest place than they're often given credit for, you know. So
yeah. Barney, you talked about kind of modesty and that idea of, you know, in the way you're making your content, there's an element of modesty. But for me, I think the thing that always shines through is your sheer genius. I just think you are an absolute genius. And thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me today. I'm going to continue to use you as an example to BFI students, and I, you know, I just look forward to what you create next. I just can't wait, Barnaby. So,
oh, thank you. Well, I want to return the compliment, because you guys have been such a big part of my journey from so early on. You know, you allowed me access to the equipment, to the space, to the expertise, and all these kind of things that, you know, as a 13-year-old, you're sort of maybe a bit kind of like insecure, and maybe you wouldn't kind of discover or go out of your way to discover these things on your own. So the fact that this place was, you know, the engine room, you, Phil, Will were there and able to kind of show me things, you know, not tell me how to do things, but just allow me the access to the equipment, the space, and the expertise. You know, it's the perfect mix, I think, of I guess what it is you created a wonderful environment for me to grow, if you see what I mean. And I didn't need to be pushed. You just had to allow me. You just showed me the door to somewhere, I suppose. And I'll always be thankful of that. And I use you guys as an example of a place that's doing something really, really wonderful. And whenever people talk about my journey, I always, well, if I remember to, which I think is most of the time, I'll give you guys a shout out, because you did so much for me, and I appreciate it.
thanks so much, Barney. Thank
My
you.
pleasure. Thank you.
There you go, the amazing Barnaby Dixon. Always a joy to talk to a creative. And I really look forward to the next opportunity. So, the next creative network conversation is going to be with three amazing artists. We've got Caroline Wilkins, Melanie Thompson, and Leona Jones on the 23rd of February. We really hope that that one will be a face-to-face opportunity, and we can all get to sit in a room together at the engine room to hear more about their practice and their work, and to share that conversation with you. And I look forward to seeing you soon and talking about the work that you want to create. I think my takeaway is Barnaby's comment about the best camera for the job is the one that's right in front of you. Or equally, perhaps the one that you can borrow or hire from us. If we can help you to create work, please get in touch. Take care for now. See you again soon. Bye.